beautiful children. We love you, and we know that you are thriving day by day. So I am glad that you're here because we have a great guest. And I have to tell you, when I met my brother Kareem, he spoke my language because we were like, this is what we need to be doing, fighting for our
Mhm.
kids, and we're not gonna stop, right? And so the times that I heard him speak, I was just like, yes. I am so glad that I met him. And so, hi Kareem, how are you?
Hello, Christine. I'm doing well. Doing well. Coming to you from Oakland, California. So happy to be here
Oakland,
today.
California. So go ahead and tell the guests who you are, and just what you do.
Well, let's see. I'm an educator. I'm a father, a parent, a husband. I've been in education for about 20 years, um, both in the Department of Juvenile Justice Facilities and also with Oakland Unified School District. I've been a teacher, a principal manager. I've helped people start schools. I've trained principals. I've trained teachers, etc. And I got to the point after all those years of realizing that what we were doing was very important, but there were some gaps. And so I got involved with the Oakland Alliance of Black Educators. I got involved with the NAACP in our Oakland branch, and we really tried to focus on solutions and trying to use all the connections we made, leverage the power of the NAACP to actually move the needle for kids and stop trying to put band-aids on things to find out what's really going on and how we can help them. So we've been doing that for about a year and a half now with our literacy campaign, focusing on reading overall, but then also specifically dyslexia, both in Oakland and in statewide.
So, talk about your passion about dyslexia. Like, how did you come to that place? Because it's very important for us as parents to be able to recognize some things and also be able to help our children. And so, how
Yeah.
did you come to that place?
Well, whew, there's a few things that happened to me that made me realize, okay, I need to drop my bucket down right here. First of all, when I was a student at Morehouse College, my study partner was Ennis Cosby. And Ennis, as you may or may not, is Bill Cosby's son. You may or may not know he had dyslexia. Um,
Mm,
and he wasn't the best study partner. I'll just leave it at that. Ennis was very laid back, very easygoing guy, and I would get a B, and I'd be upset, and Ennis would get a D, a D plus, and he'd be like, "Kareem, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. We got this."
aw,
I'm like, "What's wrong with this guy?" And then one summer, he went to study at a college that specialized in kids with kids with special needs, and he came back a new man. He went
wow,
from getting F's and D's to A's and B's.
wow,
And my passion was to go into education as a teacher. I wanted to come back and teach in the hood. Ennis's thing was, he wanted to help special needs students. And
yes,
so since he was killed, he was murdered. He couldn't have been more than 25 years old. In my mind, this is a way to carry on what he wanted to do, which was help kids like himself who had reading challenges, who had dyslexia, but really didn't have the support, and so they needed it in their regular day-to-day classroom. So that's the first thing. Now I kind of forgot about that for years, and I just
wow.
started doing what I was doing until one day I was like, "Oh yeah, this is the thing Ennis was talking about." And so in schools, as a principal and as a teacher, we work as hard as we can. Everybody's trying their best to do what's best for kids, but it just wasn't working at the level we needed it to work. Um, so working with the NAACP and following up with civil rights complaints and looking at the special ed concerns, which the NAACP is always very involved with, there
Right.
was this common thread about reading. Most of the challenges that happen with our kids in schools have a root cause in a reading difficulty. And so I just started asking questions. Well, why, you know, unless you think our kids just can't do it, and that's just not my view. Our kids are brilliant. And
Right.
so the question is, why aren't they reading and what can be done about it? And after doing the research and looking at the brain science of things, I came to the conclusion that the answers have been here for the last 30, 40 years. It's not a mystery. When our kids are going to special ed or going to a resource center, 85% of the time, the primary cause is low reading difficulty. And so
Mm,
the question is, what's going on in a regular classroom? And start doing my research and come to find out that we're not actually doing things nationwide now. We're not actually doing things that the kids need on the front end. And so then that creates challenges. It exacerbates challenges. So I just dug in. And the more I dug in, the more I realized this is it. This is the key to unlocking literacy, not just in Black America, but in all of America. And so
exactly.
we just started to dig in and landed here. And I'm just so glad that we did.
And I have to say that before I even came to visit you guys in Oakland, I was reading what the president had wrote, and he said it was all about literacy, right? And like the
Hmm.
importance of our children being able to read. And the most
Right.
profound thing that Mr. Holland said was, you can get to the lunch counter, but if you can't read the menu, what is
That's
the
right.
purpose of being there? And that, like, I was like, I need to meet, these are my people right here, right? And so I am so amazed at how much work and how much research you've done in the area of dyslexia, and how much you guys are just so committed to literacy. And I just thank you guys for your commitment to literacy, because it does impact our nation's children, and it does impact us all. And so your commitment in the civil rights area, around literacy and around dyslexia, talk about that. Like, what did you start doing? Did you just file complaints, or you started educating people on what it was that solution?
Well, the first thing we had to do was educate ourselves. So we knew that there was a problem. Like most parents, like, you know your child is smart. You know that. You've seen them grow up, him or her, and they ask these questions, and you see that bright light on. But then they go to school, and something's just not right.
Right.
And so we had to wrestle with that and ask key questions about what's really going on. We went to UCSF's Dyslexia Center, and they told us, they said, look, they showed us some of the brain science, they showed us some of the things that they do, and they said that kids who suffer from this type of challenge, the first year they work with them, they're treating them for PTSD. They don't even get to the
Wow.
reading because the impact of a kid not being able to read in school and struggling on a day-to-day basis, it's like, it is a form of trauma. I remember um, being at Morehouse, and Ennis telling me, Kareem, one of the things that hurt me most was not what happened at school, but it was what happened at home. He had
Oh,
several sisters who were high achieving. They were, academic all stars, so to speak. And, when you're the kid who can't read or who struggles, you get the labels. You're trifling. You're this, you're that, you're lazy. Um, and so the first thing we had to do was educate ourselves, find out what's really going on. And we had to forgive ourselves, give ourselves permission to forgive ourselves about anything, any harm we may have done to our own kids, believing stories that we heard about our kids not being able to do this or not being able to do that, and just let that stuff go. And then try to figure out where do we go from here. So we decided to make reading the focus of our local branch for the next year at least. We decided to present the research to the membership. And I'm speaking about the education committee specifically.
mm-hmm.
Present the research to the members of our local branch. Then we decided to engage with universities and ask key questions around how they were teaching reading. There's a science to this. This isn't some voodoo, instructional method. This is the science, and this is what research has shown works. And we found out that they're all over the place. Then we
Mm-hmm.
went to each and every K-12 school system in our area. That's the district, that's the charters. That we went to all of them and we asked them key questions. So, how are you teaching reading? What materials are you using? Is it backed by the research? Does it have this, that, and the other? And just we asked all the questions. So, the first thing we wanted to do was get a sense of the layout of the area. And what we realized was that, and this is I almost want to call it the secret. But the reality of it, after we did that analysis, we did our own research, we asked all those questions, we realized they don't really know what they're doing. They
Right.
don't really know what they're doing. And that's the big secret. They've tried different methods, what was popular at the time, what publishers said they should be doing. And come find out that stuff was wrong. So
Right.
then, as a local branch, we went about drafting a resolution, both for the state level and the local level, to demand that our students' civil rights be respected and protected, that they follow the science, that the superintendent, both at the state and the local level, ensure that the research is followed and that they report out to the board on what they're doing to get the curriculum together, to professionally develop their teachers, and to work with their parents and community. So that those are kind of the steps that we took. We first had to start with ourselves, then we went to the branch, then we asked key questions of the universities and the district partners, and then we drafted our resolutions, which allowed us then to work with different stakeholders from legislators all the way down with that as the underpinning to get things right.
And so, I want to applaud you guys for being unrelenting to do this, because I've known you over that process of time up until the actual resolution signing, which, yes, that happened. And so, I was like so happy that there was a breakthrough in this area with regards to
Yeah.
dyslexia, because it goes under the radar. And like you said, really, people are trying to figure out, like, well, what were we supposed to be doing? And by
Hmm.
that time, you have so many children that are illiterate and they're
That's right.
graduating, right? I know a child that just graduated last year at a third grade reading level because he
Hmm.
had dyslexia. And, I can only imagine, and it was a generational literacy issue in his family as well. And I can
Hmm.
only imagine, how are those children now functioning in society, not being able to read, right? And so speak about that part. And it is a civil rights issue,
Hmm.
to not offer a child what they need to help them be able to be a functioning member of society, to be able to read. Literacy is a civil rights issue, hands down, and we cannot deny that. And there, I'm so glad that you guys didn't just start pointing the finger of blame, but you dug
Right.
in to get partners to say, let us work through this together, right? Let
Hmm.
us come up with this solution as a community, embrace these children, embrace these different various universities, embrace these schools, no matter where people were at. And let's work on this literacy problem and this dyslexia situation so that we can bring the solution. So talk about the solution building.
Okay, so first of all, I think you hit the nail on the head about the blame piece. So one of the things we found is that um, people who work in the system of education are hypersensitive to blame.
Right,
Nobody wants to have the finger pointed at them, because most educators, from the superintendent to the board to the teachers and principals, nobody really wants to own this and say we blew it. We were
right,
following the popular trends. We thought, this particular curriculum was the bee's knees and everybody was doing it. We assumed that the publisher, so nobody wants to say oops, we actually forgot to check to see if these curriculums had the foundational skills necessary to teach a child to read. We actually forgot to find out whether or not the kids had some challenges with processing the sounds that they're hearing. We actually forgot, or we assumed. One, they're afraid of liability. If we acknowledge that we made a mistake, does that mean we're liable? And there have been cases brought against school systems. The L&T case down in Southern California recently is an example of that. There was a case in Detroit that was brought, although they didn't win the case, but the L&T's case they did, and they settled for about 35, or maybe it's about $50 million because they never taught the kids to read. And so vulnerability is the key piece to all of this, to be able to say, look, and this is what I told some of the superintendents and CEOs. I said, hard war, easy peace. If we can agree to just move forward, if we can agree that, we're going to leverage the science, we're going to find a curriculum that fits, we're going to engage our parents, if we're going to make sure the foundational skills are taught and that the text complexity goes all the way up. If we can do that, we're not blaming you at all. We understand
right.
when you know better, you do better.
You do better.
But, and this is the key piece, if you remain, recalcitrant, if you hide behind this veneer, this protectivism that people have, this protectionist attitude where you circle the wagons and deflect all blame and don't take feedback and you don't change curriculum and you won't try to engage your teachers, if you go there, it's going to be a hard war. We have to fight like our hair is on fire because these are our babies, and there's
That's
only one way
right.
you can do that. And you know, in education, people are friends. Everyone's friends. I know a lot of the people in Oakland who are working in school systems, and that's, I love you. I've known you for years, but these are our kids. So
Right.
hard war, easy peace. In fact, one CEO and chief academic officer, I remember telling them, I said, look, um, I laid it all out for them, and they said, well, what does this do for our philosophy of self-directed learning? They have a philosophy, and I said, look, let me tell you this: if we have the research and the science and choose not to follow it, and we choose to do something else, even though the results are showing that it's not working, not only is that a civil rights issue, but it's our responsibility to treat you guys like a crack house in the 80s.
I heard that.
That's a blight on the community.
Right.
Um, and so, for us, it was a matter of being very clear. We're not blaming anybody. We'll work with anyone. Forget about, what side you're on politically or this issue or that issue. We actually don't care. We'll work with whoever. And so we started to build a coalition of people. We got involved with a parent organization called the Oakland Reach. They've been great partners. It's a
Right.
community-based organization of parents who, among other things, are advocating for their kids to be able to read. And so we're like, we're natural allies. Let's go. And with their help, we've been, bringing other people in the fold, getting districts and charters to not just give lip service to things, but to actually sign on to a coalition saying we're going to use best practices. We've gotten them to go see what the other groups are doing. We've actually gotten them to talk to each other. Pretty soon, we're going to be coming out with a newsletter documenting the progress of each of these groups and how well they're fulfilling the promises they made, and just giving parents an idea of what to do, what should be happening, and then what's going on statewide. So it's been a process. I'd say the first thing is vulnerability and making sure people know we're not here to harm you, we're not here to attack you. However, we have some demands, not asks, we have some demands. In
I heard
love for our
that.
kids, we got to have some things in place because, and
Right.
this is the other thing, and I just got to tell it like this. So there is a law now. It's called the First Step Act. It's a federal law. It was pushed by Amir Baraka, the actor, as well as Senator Casserly, who's from Louisiana. And the First Step Act is the current administration's effort at criminal justice reform. And there's that I happen to think criminal justice reform is important. But there's
Yes.
one aspect to that law that people don't know too much about, and it is there is a section about dyslexia that
Mm.
now inmates coming into the federal penitentiary system in the Bureau of Prisons must be tested for dyslexia because they know that the majority of our inmates have dyslexia.
Right.
And so if they're going to reduce recidivism, they have to test them, identify them, and give them the support they need. In fact, if they're found to have it, then they're assured of getting accommodations in prison, in federal prison, to teach them how to read. Now, I think that's wonderful. I think that's great. I'm glad that the federal government is taking on that role. But here's the question for you, for your viewers, and for all of us: why do our children have to go to the federal penitentiary to
Right.
learn how to read?
That, you know,
If we know what has to be done, why are we waiting to test them when they knock somebody over the head or carjack? I mean,
right.
it's so backwards, but that's the reality of our system right now. That's not
Right.
hyperbole. That's the reality of our system. So we're trying to say to the school systems, your responsibility is to be better than the administration. Don't talk about it. Be better. Test them sooner. Teach them sooner, so that that never even has to be something that they're involved with.
So how can, and I don't know if there's a tool that parents can use that may not know if their child is dyslexic or not, that may need to know, or kind of are thinking that some things are going on and not quite sure. So what is it? What does that look like for parents? And how can they access right now, especially with, school closures, the
Hmm.
tools to be able to figure out what may be going on with their child and how to help them?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, you're right. It is tough because, um, with school closures right now, people may not have the access that they're used to having to the professionals in the field that provide them services. However, there are things parents can do even at home. So there are online screeners that parents can use. If you suspect something might be going on, if you're not quite sure and you want more information, I'd recommend a couple of things. One, you can go to the Decoding Dyslexia website. Decoding Dyslexia is a parent-led, grassroots type movement for dyslexia. They have a lot of great resources there. The second thing I do is I look for a screener um, to see if your child is hearing things the way they need to hear things, and they're free. Some of them are free. They're online. Just look up free dyslexia screener online. They'll pop up and you find one that fits for you. They'll usually send you a report afterwards. And that's something that you can then take to a professional and say, hey, look, this is what the screener showed. So I want my child tested. And then they'll go through an actual battery of tests to see, what the next steps should be. So that's the second thing. There are so many. There are other things you can do. Um, there is a book called "100 Easy Lessons to Teach Your Child to Read." If I'm a parent and I have a 4 or 5 or 6 year old, even an 8 or 9 year old, and they can't read, I'm gonna get that book from the
Yeah,
library, from the public library. You can check it out for free or just buy it. It doesn't cost that much. It's an older book, and I will go through those lessons one at a time and teach my child to read. It lays out what to do, how to do it. It gives you a script for different things, 100 easy lessons, and I would do that. But in addition to that, screener for free. Take that to a professional. Usually that's at the school. They have these resource specialists or counselors. You go to them and say, hey, look, I have this screener. I have some concerns. And then third, you'd follow up with them with an IEP process, or et cetera, for special ed. So that's what I would do. And how do I know if my child might be at risk, or how do I know if I even need to screen them in the first place? Well, the question is, are they hearing things well? Are they hearing the sounds? Are they able to um, take sounds and mix them up? So, for example, if you say, hey, Hakeem, the word is cat. Now I'm going to take off the k sound and put a h sound on there instead. Now what do I have? And they look at you like, huh? So are you trying to mix and match the sounds like Legos? They need to be able to
right.
do that. There's actually a couple of laws that there's one law and one that's coming that people should be aware of. So a couple of years ago, a group of parents got together and they put pressure on Capitol Hill in California, in Sacramento, and said, we have too many kids going to special ed, and they're going there for behavior reasons, they're going there for all this other stuff, but the real thing is they're not reading well, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not even being tested to see if they're hearing things right. So after a lot of political pressure and a lot of grassroots movement, Congress passed a law. The state assembly in California passed a law that says before a child goes to special ed, when they're tested, I should say, they also should be tested for how they hear things. They have to do it. It's the law. Now, from our work, what I can tell you is that most school systems are not doing that. So your
Right,
child can go to special ed. They've never been tested for what they call auditory processing, which is the key piece of dyslexia.
right,
So they go to special ed for behavior. They go to special ed for these other things. But wait a second, you got to test them for what the law says they have to be tested for, which is, are they hearing things the way they need to hear them so that they can put together the language like Legos. So you
right.
have to be vigilant. Um,
Exactly. Yeah, and
and if
I can totally relate because my grandson has autism, He's been
You do
diagnosed
not
with
have a
ADHD.
grandson.
Yeah, I had two grandkids
You
in
do
one
not have
month. Shout out to grandparents across
black dog
America.
crack. Okay.
Thank you, Kareem. I appreciate that. So, my 8-year-old grandson, and I've shared this and openly, he has autism. He
Hmm.
also was then later diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but I still knew there was something else. So we had
Mm.
him tested and have pushed. Okay. I mean, this was a push for the cognitive auditory processing deficit
That's,
test, and come to find out he does have cognitive auditory processing
see there.
deficit issues, right?
Hmm.
Which require special programming, which he can access it online. You have to be trained to do it. And so, we went to go see a specialist in this area who tested him, and like, yes, but she gave us vital things that we could do
Hmm.
at home, and also gave the school some things that he could utilize to help strengthen those areas in the brain and how he
Hmm.
received sound and information. Because parents, really, if you see signs that your child is struggling, you can't quite put your finger on it, just go to the pediatrician, say, I need my child tested for
That's right.
whatever you can test them for, because I need to understand, are they hearing well? Are they seeing well?
That's
Some
right.
people have a visual processing deficit, right? And so you can't assume these things, or that you would know how to best help your child. So first, I say listen to people that are very trained in this area and that have published works, and have worked in this field to help. Because I will tell you, now my grandson is less frustrated and more successful, because we dealt with it early on. He's in third grade now, and so we've been dealing with it very, very intentionally.
Hmm.
And so how can people contact you, Kareem, if in order to find out about the
Yeah,
resolution and how they can build
absolutely.
that up in their communities?
Absolutely. They can email me. So we have our committee has a group called Fulcrum, which is basically the initiative on reading, dyslexia, etc. So you can email me right there and I'll get back to you, or someone from our education committee will. So you can email me at Kareem at fulcrum-oakland
Okay.
.org.
Okay, and anyone that did not get that, you can also reach out to me, and I will get that information to you. And anything else that he gave a recommendation about during this time, you can contact me at Christina at npunion.org, talking about dyslexia. We could spend so much time talking about this, right?
Yeah,
I mean, this is a beast. It has to do with literacy. How are we sending our children back into society unable to read? And what does
that's right.
that look like? And why do prisoners have access to things that our children don't have access to? And we can change this one person at a time, one community at a time, and it does require us locking arms with organizations and other people that are committed to staying intentional and consistent and unrelenting. I like that part, because I agree with you, my brother. I can come to you with words, or I can come with a sword. Is the difference
That's right.
between a gnat and a roaring lion, right? Like, which one do you want? Because we're talking about our children. We're talking about their tomorrow. We're talking about a breaking generational, perpetual, cyclical things so that they can thrive. Each generation should do better than the last. And if we're sending 18-year-olds out of high school, 17-year-olds out of high school, and they're reading at a third grade level, the deficit wasn't in the kid.
That's right.
It was in the people that were supposed to provide that child with what they
That's right.
needed.
That's right. And
Um,
the reality is, Christina, most of our educators have not been trained to support kids with dyslexia or any special, unless they have specific training. So this is a gap in our system overall in terms of how we're training our educators. I'll also say that people really, I don't want people to worry and think, oh my, something wrong with my child. People need to understand that this is called the genius disease. It's not even a
Yes.
disease. At MIT, they call it the MIT disease. In other
Right.
words, some of our brightest, they call it the genius disease because this is your, your Bill Gates, your Steve Jobs, your Magic Johnson and Kobe Bryant, all of it's dyslexia. So if you look at the people who are doing great things, you know, it's about 20% of the population, 43% of the self-made millionaires.
Right.
This group of, because they think differently, they process things
Right.
differently, they see things that other people can't see. They put the pieces of the puzzle together differently. These are your folks that in every industry they are dominant. Um, if we give them what they need to compete. So don't look at it as, oh, something's wrong with my kid. No, actually, you got a genius on your hand.
Thank
You just got to
you.
make sure they get what they need so that they can actually do what they need to do. The second thing is they have the biggest challenge is making sure that it's not just in a special ed classroom where stuff is happening. Kids need foundational skills, core instruction in regular tier one everyday school,
Right.
not just in some small room in the corner where they send the kids. No, 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 no. This needs to be regular because the majority of kids need to be taught the same way dyslexic kids are taught. They just may need a little bit more. And
Right.
then the last thing is so Senator Anthony Portantino, who's a California senator, actually a chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, has put forward a bill. It's called SB 1174
Thank
um,
you.
that requires all K2 students in California to be tested for or to be screened for dyslexia. It's a
Yes.
funded mandate. There'll be districts will be able to be reimbursed for it, but it's a mandate. Now, it's going to take a little bit of advocacy from those who are inclined to do such things, and I would recommend people get involved, get the information, write their congressmen or assemblymen, senators, etc. But SB 1174 is very important. It shouldn't just be districts like Palo Alto that screened their kids and found 25% were at promise for dyslexia. We across the state of California, we're going to find, I predict, that this is something that many, many students need and are challenged by. And so that legislation is very important. It's just a bill right now. And with the coronavirus going on, I'm not sure about the timing of things, but people should keep their eye on that. We'll, through our newsletter and other things, we'll try to keep people up to date on it as well. But it's very, very important because that would unlock things for a lot of California's children to be able to say, oh, you do need this. We have to adjust our practices to accommodate what we now know you may be wrestling with. So that's also
Right.
something to keep your eye on.
Thank you. And I appreciate you saying that. And I think the message to the rest of the nation is that you can also look at these things, the resolution, the bill, right? Shout out to Oakland NAACP for your literacy
I'm
work
trying.
and campaign, and Oakland Reach, amazing. That's great. And all of the other people that you guys have locked arms with. But I think that it can be duplicated in other
Hmm.
areas so that no child will leave school without knowing how to read, right? And they will be
Absolutely.
able to learn how to utilize the skills and tools that they gain from learning to read the way that they can understand,
Hmm.
and take that into adulthood instead of going into adulthood illiterate. And so,
That's right.
as we end, I just want to give everyone a word of hope, because since we know how to do better, we can do better, right? And we owe these children so much with regards to literacy. And so, he gave his email address. Again, if you would like to contact him for any more information, you can reach out to me as well. Thank you for joining us. And Kareem, if you have
My
a final
pleasure.
statement, I go ahead. I will close with
My
that.
only final statement is thank you, Christina. I appreciate your opportunity to be here, and just to encourage people. There's a time to talk about it and there's a time to do it. What our
Yes.
kids need from us is we have to demand that what they're being taught is what they need. We have to demand that our educators and our school systems are using the research and the evidence. The right curriculum is out there. There's several different ones. We don't endorse any particular curriculum, but there's some good ones out there um, that have the foundational skills, accept nothing less. And if your child has an IEP or if your child has been sent to special ed or is found to need some special services, make sure they get what they need, make sure they're tested for auditory processing. And if the system can't do that, then it's their obligation to pay for somebody to do it who can.
I heard that. And even right now, services and supports are not supposed to just be hindered or altered, like stop. Like, no, you
That's
have
right.
to figure out a way to provide in home where we're at, whether I don't know what that looks like for everyone, but it needs to continue to happen. And
That's
so
right.
I appreciate you saying that. Again, thank you for coming on. And I thank you guys all for watching. We'll see you back at 11 a.m. tomorrow, Managing Day to Day with Christina Laster, National Parents Union. We love you, America's children. Stay positive, parents and caregivers and families. We got this. We're doing it, and we're doing it day to day. So while the government works on flattening the COVID curve, we're working on increasing the learning curve. See you guys tomorrow. Thanks.